So, Steve, I did something completely different today. I went out to, we're going to talk about Chat GPT later in the show. And I said, I'm going to see what happens if I let Chat GPT write MedTech Crossroads today.
Well, it's going to sound believable, but is it going to be accurate?
You are exactly right. And that you've basically summarized where we're going to go with the whole medical information stuff. It's going to sound right, but is it accurate? That's exactly right. But I'm going to give Chat GPT its moment in the sunshine, because this actually is itself slightly inaccurate, but I'm just going to go with it. This is the first paragraph it wrote for today's show. Welcome to MedTech Crossroads, the show where we explore the intersection of medical technology and healthcare innovation. Brought to you by Into Being, your trusted source for the latest in medical advancement. That's not quite right. I'm your host. It doesn't tell me my name, though, so I can't read that off of here. Today, we're having an exciting episode filled with groundbreaking news, insightful interviews. Actually, we don't have any interviews today. Upcoming events in the world of MedTech. So let's dive right in. And then, like in square brackets, it's got like opening credits roll. I think you can make that happen.
I think we can make that happen.
All right, let's do it. But you're exactly right, Steve. That's exactly what it is. The rest of the stuff that ChatGPT wrote for me, completely off, just like wildly crazy stuff. Obviously, kind of a big ask. I told it, "Hey, go look at our YouTube and write me a show," and it certainly did not accomplish that. So, what is our show today? We're going to tell you all about the local events and national events that are happening. The summer, of course, is slowing down a little bit, so the list is a little bit shorter. After that, we are going to talk about a few news items. The one that I think many will be interested in is this question of Chat GPT being applied to medical information, which is going to be fascinating. But before that, ethylene oxide sterilization master files we're going to talk about. The first one has been accepted by FDA. That's got some cool implications. And then sort of a triumvirate, we're going to talk about incumbents, payors, and collaborative communities, or the necessity of working together in collaborative ways. Long gone are the days of just coming up with an idea, getting some money, and getting your medical device to market. There's 3 news items that are all going to blend together when we talk about that. But first up, let's talk about the upcoming events. These gathered from a number of sources like the ones you see on your screen. The first item, a webcast coming up on July 20th, final guidance for the content of pre-market submissions for device software functions, straight from the FDA. So as you know, software can be a medical device too, whether it's standalone or whether it's mixed up with hardware. And going to FDA and saying, hey, FDA, we want clearance, it's going to subject you to a lot of the same things you would expect if you were going with a piece of hardware, but also some nuances and some subtleties when it comes to the software itself. So there is a final guidance document out, and FDA will be presenting a webcast on that on July 20th, 2023. At last time we put this up, we didn't actually have the link for it. We're going to try to get you that link in the YouTube notes because when FDA sent this around, they didn't send a link with it. But I think they'll have that link. We'll get that up to you in the YouTube notes. The Midwest Showcase put on by Project MedTech coming up August 30th. We'll see you in Cleveland, Ohio. We will be there as well from Into Being. A number of other names you'll recognize, Dwayne Mancini and the team at Project MedTech, doing some cool work of bringing the community together. We love it when people bring the community together. In fact, Dwayne and I have been talking, and we're not gonna spill the beans yet, but a potential collaboration upcoming between Project MedTech and Into Being. So hopefully you'll enjoy that when it comes. 2023 Michigan Life Sciences Showcase, MichBio, Lansing, Michigan, September 18th. They'll be kicking off the fall season here in Michigan with medical devices, pharma, health devices, digital health, cannabis, and a whole bunch of sort of life science related topics at the Life Sciences Showcase, September 18th in Lansing. And the MedTech conference is coming back to the Anaheim Convention Center October 9th through 11th in Anaheim, California. That's put on by AdvaMed, medical device advocacy group, but going to California. That's it for our events. We're going to talk about FDA and industry news coming up next. Well, we knew that it was going to be a problem. Ethylene oxide, FDA wants to reduce the amount. We've talked on the show any number of times about the new guidances from from EPA. Let's try that again. New guidances from EPA. But of course, medical device advocacy groups coming out and saying, slow down, we're not saying that we love ethylene oxide. We're just saying that that's how an awful lot of your medical devices get sterilized today. Hold on, let's balance these competing factors. And the good news is that FDA had announced in April a radiation sterilization master file pilot program. They are doing other types of sterilization. They've got a whole list here. Moist heat, dry heat, radiation, ethylene oxide, vaporized hydrogen peroxide, other sterilization methods. They're just kind of open to all these things. And both for 510Ks and for PMAs, FDA is trying to get methods cleared such that you won't have to submit for a new device clearance if you have to change your sterilization method. So let's say you're a manufacturer and you're out there and you're using a traditional ethylene oxide cycle and it becomes unavailable to you and you just can't get your product out there. Are you dead in the water? Do you have to stop? Do you have to revalidate your entire product through some other method and then resubmit to FDA for clearance? This is where the sterilization master file comes in. Because if there's a master file that really has characterized this new sterilization method, FDA is trying to make it possible that certain devices can switch over and not have to resubmit. So that's really, really good news for companies that might find themselves in that space. Now this is a page that's got a lot of other information. We're not going to touch on all of it. I think we've showed this page before from FDA's website. What is interesting down here, having announced these master file programs, here's the 510K ethylene oxide sterility change master file pilot program. This was May 2022 that they announced this. So if you had a established category B or novel sterilization method, you could be part of this. Now there were a bunch of companies that were part of this for PMA holders. A bit of news here that I want to get you to. Let me see if I can find it here. Well, of course, we've been through this before, but now we're not going to find it. It's up the page here. Oh, there it is. Almost lost him at the bottom. Anderson Scientific, just a week ago, got FDA's nod for their flexible chamber ethylene oxide sterilization method. And it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. It's still using ethylene oxide, but the way they're reducing the amount is they have a flexible chamber. And the flexible chamber can fill up with ethylene oxide, but it can then be collapsed down so the ETO can be retrieved instead of just vented into the atmosphere. So Anderson has this. They've got a master file with FDA. That means some relatively good news that people who are using their method now will hopefully not have to resubmit for a 510K if they need to change sterilization methods. So I guess if you're out there and you've got a 510K and you think you're going to have to change your sterilization method, there may be hope on the horizon. And of course, there's other methods out there as well, methods that use supercooled gases and things like that. And I'm sure we'll hear more about those as time goes on and this master file program continues to progress. Well, next up, we want to link three things together. You've heard us talk any number of times about how interrelated the world is, how it's not good enough to just think in silos. And 3 articles came across my desk this week. One about working with incumbents. We're going to talk about that next. What does it mean to work with an incumbent? It means to work with an existing company that has a market share. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, why would I want to do that? I want to revolutionize the market. I want to completely take over." And as we'll find out from this article, um, it's not always quite as simple as that. These companies that are incumbents are there for a reason, and they have been part of a market. This article is from Med City, so we'll take a look at it here in a second. But before we go there, Payors. FDA has a program to get you connected with payers, because just like you might not be able to access the market without playing with some of the big players who own that market, you're never going to get your device paid for if insurance companies aren't willing to do so. And there are some methods for getting in contact with insurance companies, even as part of the FDA process. So that's interesting. And then finally, from FDA also, collaborative communities. Collaborative communities. All of these have the idea of working together, this idea of not going it alone. And in these areas at least, access to the market, access to funding for a device, and stakeholders with common interests. All of these elements are places where companies can really no longer afford to go it alone. And so here are some options for you. Again, from Med City, this article, Why Working with Incumbents Offers a Path to Success for Health Tech Startups, that they're talking about. Just some interesting tidbits here. VCs invested $25.9 billion globally in the health tech sector last year. And startups are still the lifeblood of that. They're still driving that in many amazing ways. But this is an interesting point. One of the biggest reasons health tech startups can benefit by working with incumbents is due to the unique nature of the industry. Many different stakeholders. Stakeholders have their own requirements and priorities. Most often they're at odds with one another. Well, we can attest to that. Hospitals are part of that. You have the startup themselves. And when they talk about the hospitals and health systems, they note that this last year, more than half have been operating in the red. They actually haven't been making a profit. So even with the crazy high cost of healthcare, we're still dealing with a lot of for-profit hospitals that aren't even making a profit, which means they can't continue that way. So the authors of this article from Med City certainly look at this option of health tech startups scaling along with a broader ecosystem of incumbents, be it the well-entrenched suppliers and device manufacturers that are already serving hospitals and operating rooms, or the hyperscalers building out their digital footprints, the big companies like Microsoft coming in and getting into health tech. Whatever your attitude is at a startup, right? Maybe you're the founder of a startup, a CEO, whatever it is, we've seen time and time again, if you go into a business pitch and you don't at least know what your competitors are, you're going to be dead in the water, right? So knowing who they are and knowing whether there's somebody you want to avoid or somebody that you could potentially collaborate with is going to get increasingly, I think, a lot of traction with investors. Because first of all, they want to know, do you know who's out there? Do you know who your competitors are? And if you don't, you can't talk credibly about that, it's not going to go very well. But if you do know who your competitors are, maybe don't always look at them just as competitors. Maybe look at them as potential scale alongers. Can I use that word? Because if a supplier is so well entrenched, they may be a bigger advantage to you as a partner than as a direct competitor. Maybe you can set yourself up for success by looking at ways to partner while still maintaining what makes you as a startup distinct. They give some examples here of companies that have done these kinds of things. Optellum is an example that they give, MedCity gives, of an earlier stage health tech startup that's partnered with incumbents such as GE Healthcare and Johnson & Johnson. It's these productive relationships that they cite that I think we've seen in our own practice, that take the time to build. In fact, entire companies have been built around these existing relationships, the ability to already have a market, already have access, and to focus on a particular niche market, because those relationships are so valuable. So to maintain those, to leverage them. In fact, the big companies need new ideas. They need things that they can try, but they have to be able to try them at a low risk to themselves. They usually can't afford to take the risks that the small companies can. So all this article by Oliver Keown, who is the managing director and head of Intuitive Ventures. Nice article there for MedCity Influencers program. And hopefully it gives, for those who are either investing in or leading MedTech startups, just another way to think about this. You got to know your competitors, but then ask yourself the question, are these actually competitors, or could they be, with the proper protections in place, could they be strategic partners? And to give yourself space to think about that. That's the first point. Incumbents, working with incumbents. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I feel like everyone that came to us at Into Being would say, well, we're going to go this alone and we're going to revolutionize the industry. There's an example of maybe you want to understand the industry. Maybe you want to understand who's playing in the space and be able to work with them rather than against them. What about payers, though? An increasing question that we get coming through our doors. Who do I talk to about reimbursement? How do I get this done? I will mention that our friends over at Project MedTech, that's something that they do engage in, reimbursement. So you can always look up Dwayne and team over there on the reimbursement question. What if you want to go talk to payers directly? Well, FDA has hung up this nice webpage, Medical Device Coverage Initiatives Connecting with Payers via the Payer Communication Task Force. Sounds more military than healthcare, but nevertheless, this task force gives some opportunities to get payer input. They have the Early Payer Feedback Program. It's a voluntary opportunity when you're doing a clinical trial design or other plans for gathering clinical evidence needed for supporting coverage decisions. You can access the payers listed below. We'll go to that in just a second. And it's really part of a Q-sub with FDA. So who would be thinking about this? A company, and there's many, right, that are thinking about doing a Q-sub, a pre-sub, or similar type of meeting with FDA. And maybe you just want to say, hey, can we bring these payers to the table? Here are the payers involved in this. Aetna, BCBS, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Care First, Blue Cross Blue Shield, HealthWorks, CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Cigna, Clover Health, Duke Evidence Synthesis Group, ECRI, Excite International Health Innovations. Well, the list goes on. Highmark, Humana, Kaiser Permanente, National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, Premier Inc., Providence Health Plan, and United Health Group. So all of these companies, these healthcare payers, are enrolled in this early payer feedback program. And you actually have access to them to obtain their input when you're doing a Q-sub through FDA about clinical trial design. What would you be asking? Well, probably you'd be asking something like, we think we can get clearance for our product doing a clinical trial design this way, but hey, dear payer, would you pay for this? With this kind of an outcome from this trial? Yeah, it might get us FDA clearance, but if the payer won't pay for it, what's the point? And so this is a really neat program. It'll be fun to see how much this one gets used, but certainly an option if you're out there for a pre-sub for a clinical trial design. This would be the place to access this. There are some other things. So you can email this email address here. There's a request document that can be downloaded here, and you can get involved with that program. There's also this thing called Parallel Review Pilot Program with CMS. We haven't dug into this one too much, but you can also get a national coverage determination potentially um, to get that through CMS. They said that this would be fully implemented and extended indefinitely, but they're not answering questions about coding or payment. What about coding questions? So AMA, American Medical Association, is responsible for CPT codes. So they're a place to go if you want to learn more about that. And it may be the case, this sounds like a try us and we'll see what happens, that CDRH Payer Communication Task Force may be able to help connect medical device manufacturers with the AMA to address coding questions. So if you got a coding question, a CPT code question, certainly going to AMA, and if you can't get satisfaction out of them, potentially contacting CDRH Payer Communications at fda.hhs.gov. Why is CDRH encouraging this? They know it's got to be covered, so they're trying to bring the payers to the table. But the payer might be defined as traditional health insurance companies, governmental agencies that pay for health care, as well as other groups who provide input to insurance coverage, procurement, and reimbursement decisions. The recommendation is to contact the EPFP when you're planning your pivotal clinical trial or sooner, and have a proposal ready for the payer comments. What are you asking them to cover? The outcomes of this, I think, are interesting to note. The interactions have either confirmed the manufacturer's general approach or led them to modify the study designs. Additional endpoints, patient inclusion-exclusion criteria, trial sites, health economic data, real-world data, among other changes. 97 times this has happened, so nearly 100 examples of this early payer feedback program working. So that's really neat. It'll be fun to hear more anecdotes coming out of this as time marches forward. So that's number 2 of these places where collaboration is necessary. We've got incumbents working with incumbents. Don't go it alone necessarily. Talk to your payers when you can, and FDA will try to make it happen. And then the final one is collaborative communities. Now this one I found very, very interesting in light of many initiatives in our local ecosystem. There are a number of groups that are trying to convene the local community to do cool things for MedTech development. Turns out there's actually a framework for that at FDA. And I think one of the reasons this hasn't been more on the radar is that it was issued in the grand year of 2019, which was not a particularly auspicious year to get things started, given how COVID came marching through and distracted everybody and made us all not want to meet in the same place. So the idea of community perhaps suffered in 2019, but if you really think about it, these collaborative communities are groups that FDA doesn't control, but might participate in. FDA doesn't control, but might participate in. In fact, there are a number here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that FDA is participating in. Examples, a collaborative community on ophthalmic imaging. Or NEST, which we've talked about before, NEST CC, is a collaborative community. The Case for Quality is a collaborative community. MedTech Color is a collaborative community. Certainly interacted with them before. The AI Global Healthcare Initiative Collaborative Community. We were just at the AFTO RAPS conference, and if I go to, let me go to a slightly different page here. We're going to find it here. Yeah, here it is. The AI Initiative, the Artificial Intelligence Working Teams, is a initiative of AFTO RAPS Healthcare Products Collaborative, and they have working teams, AI in operations, good machine learning practices team, and AI at the point of care team. And these are collaborative communities, in this case, that FDA is willing to participate in. There's quite a few people who come to this AFDO RAPS conference each year. So what does it mean to make a collaborative community, and why are we talking about it? Well, I think that there's a lot of places where people are trying to do initiatives locally that we should be paying attention to this collaborative community model. Because FDA has laid out some things that they think justify the creation of a collaborative community and will make FDA think about being part of that collaborative community. If the challenges are ill-defined or there's no consensus on the definition of the challenges, that could be a good reason to start a collaborative community. It's not about any particular topic that you have to start a community around. It's about what interests your community. The challenges and the outcomes are complex. The partners are interrelated. Incremental and unilateral efforts to address the challenge have been ineffective. Partners seek to optimize efforts, including preventing duplication of efforts, and better outcomes could be achieved with integrating different perspectives, experiences, resources, and expertise. So when you think about it, that could apply to an awful lot of different things, an awful lot of places where people say, we should get together and all work together. FDA says, yeah, we like that idea. We call that a collaborative community. And they give some guidance over this. They actually have a toolkit, which I'll show you in just a moment. But a couple of important points before that. The FDA does not establish, manage, or control collaborative communities. So they're not going to be setting this up for you. If you want a collaborative community, you've got to go out and make one. You might be able to get somebody from FDA staff. They can come. They can be part of it if you can find the right person and convince them to come. But here's the toolkit. September 2019, none of us were paying attention in September 2019. I think we were all completely distracted. Each component of this toolkit may help existing as well as burgeoning communities effectively interface with their membership, including potentially FDA CDRH in appropriate circumstances. So what do they talk about in here? It's a long document. We won't cover the whole thing. But they say the collaborative community is focused on tackling complex challenges that impact multiple stakeholders with potentially different perspectives about the causes and solutions. So bringing a bunch of medical device manufacturers together, bringing a bunch of healthcare systems together, bringing a bunch of investors together, any of these could relate to being a collaborative community. The members have to care about the issues being addressed. They have to be impacted by the issue and have the knowledge or skills to help address the issue. Some examples that they give: patients and care partner organizations, hospitals and hospital systems, public-private partnerships, trade associations, technology manufacturers, medical device distributors, professional societies, payors, research institutions, academic institutions, other state and federal agencies, international organizations or foundations, and other non-for-profits. They call these collaborative communities results-driven. There's got to be a goal. Why did you do this? Like the AI one we just looked at is to find out how we're going to do AI as a community. So there's got to be a purpose to it. There's got to be a result that you're going for that everyone can target. They also talk about distributing the leadership. So for example, having a chair that changes every 6 months to 1 year, so that it's not run by a single entity or organization. There's a way to have all the members push this forward. They talk about developing trust and making sure everybody has a transparent seat for the whole community. A clear charter is needed. But I just thought this was a very interesting model for many of the efforts that are out there. FDA traces an outcome-based planning method. Figure out what your high-level outcomes are, build a strategic framework, build an action plan, figure out how you're going to measure it, and then measure it and adjust it as needed. So basically, what's your goal? How are you going to accomplish it? And then measure that and see if you are accomplishing it. So again, I'll bring the list back up here in just a second of the existing collaborative communities, the dozen existing collaborative communities out there, just to pique people's interest. If you're listening to this, and especially if you're in, business development or community development, I think this would be really fascinating. How do we leverage not a model that we create locally that is, just of our own creation, but how do we leverage FDA's collaborative community model to be able to leverage what is in the local ecosystem? It's a fascinating question. And again, the ones that exist out there: ophthalmic imaging, Health Technology Coordinating Center, standardizing laboratory practices in pharmacogenomics, liquid biopsy, Case for Quality Collaborative Community, the Heart Valve Collaboratory, Wound Care Collaborative, Pathology Innovation Collaborative, one for individuals with diabetes, MedTech Color, Digital Health Measurement, and AI Global Healthcare Initiative Collaborative Community. What didn't we just list there? Think about it. Maybe there's something that can be created, and that could be really cool. In all these three examples, working with incumbents, working with payors, which FDA tries to make possible, working with collaborative communities. It's all this idea that a startup no longer can go completely alone into the world of, hey, I'm going to market a medical device. Needs to be done in collaboration. Obviously, we haven't talked here about protections. How do you protect your own intellectual property? How do you keep yourself and your idea valuable to your investors? That still has to be done. But the point is, it may have to be done within the framework of working with others, and incumbents, payors, and collaborative communities are some of those kinds of entities that it may be useful to think about working with. And finally today on MedTech Crossroads, we have avoided it. We have tried to avoid it. We just couldn't avoid it. We have to talk about Chat GPT. Chat GPT has made its way into this question of medical information. We're going to use Chat GPT to look up medical information. And you know what? It's not a bad idea. I mean, that's how people use Chat GPT. They go looking for information, allow it to tell them things. But the question here, as always, is reliability. And if you've listened to this show before, and like Steve said at the outset, when I said, hey, I'll let ChatGPT write our show today, we only used the first paragraph because the rest of it was wrong and had nothing to do with the reality of what this show normally is. We've talked so many times about how the emperor appears to have no clothes when it comes to artificial intelligence. As I showed on the show some weeks ago, an album cover that I had made using Midjourney, one of the AI art generating programs. And if you look at it and you say, wow, that's cool, Midjourney made that, huh? Well, it's not entirely true, because I had to discriminate time after time after time saying, no, that's not quite what I want. Hey, artificial intelligence, it's not quite what I want. Try again. And so when we finally got to something that worked, the AI was only the thing throwing dirt at the wall until I liked what stuck on that wall. And of course, that is how it works with most things that AI creates. You have to look at it and say, is that what I wanted? And then tailor, tailor, tailor until it works. Now, in this case, the outcome of this paper is that the training data sets are probably not sufficient as is to use ChatGPT for medical information. One of the outcomes is that it was basically like reading static web pages about medical information. It was considered low to moderate quality data, which is kind of, frankly, what you would expect if you went out on the internet and just started searching willy-nilly, not really caring where you got the information from. So one recommendation, obviously, that comes out of this whole thing is maybe you better only train on data sets that you actually find to be reliable, peer-reviewed journals, etc. But then, of course, the question becomes, well, how much benefit are we still getting out of that? Time will tell. Here's what they did. They used ChatGPT 4, the latest release of ChatGPT, to assess the reliability of medical information provided. They used 5 conditions: gallstone disease, pancreatitis, liver cirrhosis, pancreatic cancer, and hepatocellular carcinoma, scoring it using this thing called EQUIP. And they said that the agreement between the guideline recommendations and the answers provided by ChatGPT was about 60%. So that's not great. That means that ChatGPT was not getting to the industry standard recommendations that would have been there. It provided medical information of comparable quality to available static internet information. The authors, of course, hold out hope that as time passes, this could become a standard for caring for people and providing medical information. Let's get into some of the interesting details here. The first one here is a little bit funny. AI hallucinations. During the data acquisition process, one event of AI hallucination was encountered. This is a new term for me. Have you heard this one before, Steve?
Oh, I can't say I have.
I didn't know that it was sentient yet. I thought you had to have sentience to have hallucinations. But yeah, here it is. The question, what are the qualitative benefits for treatment of gallstones? What are the qualitative benefits for treatment of gallstones? The AI answered, improved physical appearance. In some cases, gallstones can cause jaundice, which can cause the skin and eyes to turn yellow. Treatment of gallstones can help alleviate this symptom, improving the patient's physical appearance and self-esteem. So that might actually count as sentience. It's actually realized that the vanity of not having jaundice might be a reason to treat gallstones. Anyways, the authors call that an AI hallucination. They only had one of these, but they say that the software provided low to moderate quality information. It's what you get if you go searching the internet, basically, is what they're saying. Now, there are some problems with it, though. ChatGPT does not specifically highlight medical advice that is contested or subject to debate. So you don't have a read as to how controversial the information you're getting is. As an example, ChatGPT proposes radiotherapy to treat pancreatic cancer. And apparently that's not, this is not medical advice, but apparently that's not completely out of the realm of truth. But it's mentioned in the same sentence as surgery or chemotherapy, suggesting equivalence of those treatment modalities and ignoring that multimodal cancer treatment provides a sequence and hierarchy of therapies. So if you took ChatGPT strictly, directly, and just said, oh, I could pick any one of these, you would actually be missing what appears, again, this is not medical advice, what appears to be multimodal treatment, which is how people would tend to approach it today. It also makes vague statements. The cost of medical care for liver cirrhosis can be substantial. Not incorrect, but very non-informative. And the authors ask, is the software aware that it's providing a vague answer? And is it just using it as a punt? It's just kind of going, well, okay, I don't actually have information, so I'm just going to say something that sounds good, which wouldn't be all that useful, because what does substantial cost mean to a given patient? Of course, it would be relative to their ability to cover that treatment. Also, this idea of contextualization. And I love this sentence. I'm thankful that they put this sentence in here, because I think it's where the promise of AI is. People are looking at it with rose-colored glasses on. The role of healthcare professionals in providing and contextualizing information may grow and become more relevant than ever. And if these AI language models provide a tool for it, great, so be it. But what they're discovering, and not hard to predict, what they're discovering is the contextualization, relative importance of information, and understanding nuance is something that these models are still not doing well. Will they ever? We'll find out. They finish with this. In the future, the progression of AI chatbots will require monitoring and repeated assessment of quality. This is really this question of validation. Medical devices need to be validated. If you're using artificial intelligence to generate an idea, which you yourself will validate because you were an artist and you're going to say, I liked it or I didn't, and then you finally decide to use it, well, that'll be great. But if we're going to use it for healthcare, it has to be validated. And right now, those doctors and healthcare providers are the ones validating whatever comes out of something like this. They still need to be there. And as tools like this increase, they may have to be there more. So as they say, a first cornerstone, a great paper taking GPT-4 and applying it to medical information to see how it behaves. Right now, it's about like surfing the internet. So we'll see where we go from there. But found that one really interesting. Well, that brings us to the end of our content today for MedTech Crossroads. We got some cool things coming up in the future. We're doing events and FDA news these days. We're going to start going back to various other questions that people have in interviews as we get back towards fall. I'm looking forward to making some of those happen. We're going to give just a moment for anybody who may be tuned in and wants to ask a question about any of the things that we've talked about. Feel free to raise your hand either in the Zoom room or chat on YouTube Live. For those who are on there that I see, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Or if you have an event coming up that you would like to tell us about, we'd be more than happy to pass that on to the audience. So we'll give just a minute for that in case there's any comments. Always have to give just a minute because sometimes one will come in just as we're saying goodbye to everybody and then it's like, oh no, we missed them. But it looks like not today. Thank you for being here with us on MedTech Crossroads. I really enjoyed talking with you about these things, and we will look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great one.